Thanks. Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to visitors. There's lots of visitors here tonight, so very welcome. We've come to the end. Can you believe it? That we've come to the end of the series, The Beating Heart of Buddhism. It's gone like that, hasn't it? Really quick. And so this is the last talk in the series, and next week we'll finish with a sevenfold puja. So what have we learned about the beating heart of Buddhism? What have we learned? That the beating heart of Buddhism is the awakening heart-mind of the Bodhisattva. That the beating heart of Buddhism is the bodhicitta, and that all the practices outlined in the Bodhicharyavatara have one goal, and that is the arising of the bodhicitta in the heart of the practitioner, in our heart, in our mind. And in potential, we are the beating heart of Buddhism. The bodhicitta, the awakening heart-mind, in potential is us. So that's hopefully what we've learned. So a bodhisattva, we've learned, is a being whose whole existence is dedicated to the service of others, alleviating the suffering of others. And that they have the capacity to do that. That they're infinitely resourced, they never get burnout, they don't see this helping of others as work, only play. And this is because of this very wonderful, precious bodhicitta has arisen in them, the awakened heart, the awakened mind. And we can get a bit confused about service, being at the service of all sentient beings. I used to get really confused about it. Vajratari used to talk about being in service to something, and it used to make me think of Victorian maids in scrubbing out grates, and getting sore fingers. I wasn't remotely interested in being in service. It wasn't something that inspired me at all. But I honestly think that these days I do feel a little bit more warm towards the idea. The bodhicitta is this great force for good that goes beyond the individual, beyond any one person. It's bigger than just one person in service. The bodhicitta is mysterious and magic, and that's, if you notice the title of the talk, A Touch of Magic, a poetical invocation of deep spiritual forces is what this talk is about. So I hope to live up to that. And the bodhicitta is mysterious and magic and beyond the everyday, but it's also human. That's later. For example, someone like Dada Rinpoche, who we heard about a couple of weeks ago, a living bodhisattva, and that was his everyday experience. This service for all beings was just his. That's what he did. And he was able to do the most amazing things for the people he served, right the way through his life, on 3 hours sleep a night. So it is magical and mysterious and human. This very place, the lotus paradise, this very body, the Buddha. If not here, where? If not us, who? And if we were to think of ourselves as novice bodhisattvas, then we'd be practicing to set up the conditions for the bodhicitta to arise in us. We would be serving whatever helped the bodhicitta to arise for the good of all beings. So this is what we can serve. Something noble, beautiful, the culmination of all the perfections that all these talks have been about. The desire, we can serve this, the desire for the bodhicitta to arise in us for the benefit of all beings. And this would represent the highest in ourselves. So all the practices in the Bodhicharyavatara, which this book has been waved about quite a lot over the last few weeks, very beautiful cover as well. This one, do you remember this, the Bodhicharyavatara? All the practices in there are designed to bring about the arising of the bodhicitta in the aspiring bodhisattva, us. To bring about this tremendous force for good in the world that goes beyond any sense of me or mine. So the bodhicitta cannot be owned by a person. It's not a being, it's not a thing, it's not even a thought. It doesn't belong to even one person. It's a diamond, it's the sun, it's a healing tree. There's only one bodhicitta, and we can all take part in it. And if you think about those lines from the Dhammapada, that experiences are preceded by mind, produced by mind, and led by mind, then there's no reason why we can't imagine it into being. We can imagine the bodhicitta into being. Why not imagine that? If we can imagine anything in the world, everything in the world has been imagined at some point, then why not imagine that? So we're not imagination in the sense of fantasy, but the faculty that's open to the arising of that possibility. And one way to imagine our way to it is the sevenfold puja, what you might find in one of these books. So the puja is designed, it's set up for the... So who's never done a sevenfold puja? Just let me know who's never done one before, never been to one. Okay, it's a couple. Okay, everyone else has probably done them a million times. I'm sitting there thinking, oh, the puja. Yes, well, it is designed for us to go beyond our limited self into something vast, something infinitely beautiful, infinitely connected and compassionate. The bodhicitta opening ourselves to this something beyond. And sometimes at the end of the puja, there is this very deep, peaceful silence and such a sense of togetherness that it does feel like we've gone beyond into something that does have a touch of magic about it. Dharmadina, in the front of this book, she writes, the bodhicitta can arise within or descend upon. Those are probably quotations from something Sangharakshita said. The spiritual community practicing together. And by so practicing, we can bring into being what Sangharakshita has called the collective consciousness. A special sort of consciousness, common to, in a sense even shared by, a number of truly human individuals who follow the same spiritual disciplines and have the same spiritual ideals. The performance of puja can therefore be seen as an essential element in the creation of a spiritual community. So it's a ceremony, it's a ritual. It's quite formal, but hopefully joyful and meaningful, led by an order member, with a high, where there are order members to lead them. Not all sanghas are lucky have that, but with a high ideal of giving away everything in service to the highest in ourselves. Has special verses in a particular order, chanted in call and response, and the verses are taken from the Bodhicharyavatara and put together by Bhante Sangharakshita. Each verse creates a certain mood and atmosphere which builds and culminates in letting go into a great peace, the peace of enlightenment. A poetical invocation of real spiritual forces. We don't need to take it literally. We use our imaginations. We imagine our way there. You know, it's obvious in a way. We're not giving lamps encrusted with jewels. You know, we're not going to give away all our possessions. That's not going to happen. But we can try and connect with the poetry and at least stay open to the possibility that these words, this poetry is making a difference below the level of consciousness. Now, is this all real? Is it out there? Are the things that we're invoking really out there? Are they in our mind? It doesn't really make any difference. There are dimensions to our consciousness that are beyond known states of mind. We all know that, don't we? And the puja can speak to them. There are lots of different kinds of pujas. There are some dedicated to a particular Buddha or Bodhisattva. There's pujas to Tara, say, or the Buddha Shakyamuni. And occasionally, in Sheffield, or on retreat or the centres, you might find yourself doing the standard sevenfold puja. So that's the one that's in this book. So the first section, and what I'm going to do is go through each section separately, one at a time, and explain a little bit about it. So the first section is called worship. And people with a theistic cultural conditioning, religious conditioning, might think, oh my God, worship. I thought I'd left all that worship stuff behind me when I came to Buddhism. Because Buddhism certainly does tick those logical, rational boxes in our mind, doesn't it? Well, you might have other associations coming from a religious background with worship. But actually, it's more about offerings and connecting with beauty and perfuming our mind with beauty. He uses imagery around the 7 traditional Indian offerings for an honoured guest. So flowers, food, water. And that's symbolised by the 7 offering bowls, which you'll always see. Hopefully here you always see the 7 offering bowls. And that's what it represents, that the 7 traditional offerings from India. We're inviting the enlightened mind to come into our experience in the puja, so we honour it with special traditional offerings. In Sheffield, we use an alternative. So some of the verses that we use in Sheffield for our puja, they're not from this book, but they are from the Bodhicharyavatara. And we do that because the honoured guest symbols are very strongly associated with, they're very strongly culturally Indian. They're associated with coming into a bathhouse after a long and dusty trek across India. And so that's often a bit difficult for us to connect with in frozen north of Sheffield. So we include a different bit from the worship section of the Bodhicharyavatara, where he invites us to imagine offerings from the natural world, offerings of beauty of nature. So, often nature is our main connection with beauty, especially here in Sheffield, out in the peak. So we beautify our mind, and those images that we use in what you might call the Sheffield puja is we can imagine ourselves in the peak, mountains and clear lakes and the haunting cry of the wild geese. So, if we have an honoured guest, which is what we're doing in the puja, we're inviting the enlightened mind. We clear up, don't we? If we're inviting the enlightened mind, we want to clear up our mind with grace and with images of beauty and nobility, so that the gap between us and the enlightened mind is a little bit smaller. So there's no mess in the sink and a table full of papers. We clear up and make our mind as beautiful as we can, with images of the natural world. So we make some effort to connect with beauty. And if we've done this puja a gazillion times, we might have to make quite a bit of effort to connect with those images of beauty. And so also because if we have any feelings of awe and reverence, they often come from being in nature. Mountains at night and the deep lakes, how small we are and how awesome the world is. And we need reverence and awe to invite the enlightened mind. We must see that the enlightened mind is way further on than we are, vaster and kinder than me. And reverence arises when metta meets something higher than ourselves. So it's not about debasing ourselves and groveling. Worship isn't about that. It's where metta meets reverence. There's love in there. There has to be love in there for there to be reverence. And that's what the Buddha recognized. Even an enlightened being needs something to revere. And if we're not sitting in front of an amazing mountain or a still lake, we need to use our imagination. So we shut our eyes and we just imagine that we are in front of these, we're conjuring, it even says, conjuring these things up in my mind. We can conjure them up and it works. The brain doesn't know the difference. Your brain doesn't know the difference between the benefits that we receive from this feeling of awe, of standing in front of a mountain. Your brain doesn't know the difference between that and imagining it, which is amazing, isn't it? We can still feel the benefit of that, even if we're conjuring it up. We don't have to worry about making stuff up. It's okay. It doesn't make any difference. We still benefit from that. So first we invite the enlightened mind and we beautify our mind in an attempt to match the mind that we've invited. And in this way, we bring something beyond ourselves into our experience. And then what we want to do is we long to connect with it, even to become it. And one traditional way to do that is through mantra. So that comes next. So mantra is the sound form of the qualities of the enlightened being. So we've invited them into our imaginations, and we can also connect with them in another way through sound. And chanting a mantra, as I'm sure you've experienced, well, I can't be sure. I hope you might have experienced, can be heart-opening. Chanting a mantra can be very heart-opening. They resonate here, when you chant, it kind of vibrates in the body. And the tunes are often very harmonious and beautiful. And paying attention to everybody else and making sure that we're kind of in tune with others, it's a really good practice of going beyond ourselves. So every Buddha and Bodhisattva has their own mantra, evoking compassion or wisdom or courage or determination. And it's a really lovely and effective way to connect with those qualities and the being that embodies them. Especially because we do it together. And setting up the conditions for our heart and mind to be receptive and ready for something beautiful to come in, the awakening heart mind of the bodhicitta. Mantra means that which protects the mind. And in Buddhism, the heart and the mind are the same thing. So mantra protects our heart, it softens our heart and takes away the barriers. It sounds like a protection would be something that kind of guards it, but no. Protection, in a way, softens it and opens it, so that it's a very mysterious and it's a protection mantra. So at the very least, you can't think about other stuff when you're chanting. So in that way, you can keep yourself safe from harmful papancha or worries or anxieties by chanting. Has a very strong effect anyway, give it a go. So after the first section, somebody begins a mantra, they'll sing it twice, we join in when you feel like you've got the hang of it. So then there's loads of bowing and chanting and offerings and candles and sometimes incense. And bowing has got nothing to do with idolatry, especially not debasing ourselves, or it's got nothing to do with something having power over us, so we have to kind of get low. It's not that. Even the Buddha bowed to the tree that he was enlightened under. It's good for human health and growth to have something to look up to, something to go for, some kind of goal. For the Buddha, he had the Dharma to look up for. For us, it can be the Buddha or another figure, or simply the principle of beauty, unfolding to our highest potential and doing it in unison. When someone who's leading the puja says, come up in droves, because we want to see, like, there's sometimes 7, 8, 9, 10 people all bowing together in front of the shrine. It's a really beautiful expression of solidarity, doing it together with our friends, under no obligation to do it. We're overcoming our English resistance to showing our emotions in public. Some of us have quite a lot of resistance to that. Going beyond ourselves, publicly expressing reverence for something higher than me, with our body, speech, and our mind. We chant, we use our imagination, we use our body to bow, and we light candles. And then the mantra dies down. And then the salutation section is where we greet someone who we really respect, this enlightened being that we've invited in. And in traditional Buddhist culture, that means bowing, even prostrating. My first puja that I ever went to, people were flinging themselves in front of the shrine, and it was in London, not here. And I loved it. I thought it was amazing. People really just feeling that there was something in the room that they wanted to give themselves to. And it was infectious. I really felt that deep respect for something beautiful. So in this second section, it talks about as many atoms as there are in the 1,000 million worlds. So many times I make reverent salutation. And you think that's impossible. I could never do that because I'll be bowing forever. But if you think about you being in every atom, that's a different way to see it. And everything in the universe bowing together, that can sometimes be very connecting. We evoke the whole universe, the 1,000 million worlds. And we start with the incomprehensible vastness of the Dharma. And then we move to the shrines, we move to Sanghas, we move to teachers, all those to whom respect is due. from the abstract to actual people next to us in the room, manifesting the enlightened mind to some extent. So we've got the ideal and we've got people, and we express respect for that. And the next section is the going for refuge section. This very day, I go for my refuge. That's kind of a code for commitment. So a commitment to our practice of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So we've invited the person we admire, we've expressed our deep respect, and the person, the enlightened mind. And this implies we have respect for the guidelines they live by. It's very hard to separate that from the values. Respecting the enlightened mind implies respecting the values of the enlightened mind. And if we see ourselves moving in that direction, however vague that notion might be, we need to agree with, at least to some extent, the values that they hold. And for most of us, that means having to change. Change is really hard. It's so hard to change. New habits are hard to form. All the science of change tells us that commitment to change is important. The commitment bit of it is really important. So we commit ourselves in this section to at least trying to live by the values of the person or the principle we value. We want to be like them. We commit to the change needed to become like them. This very day, I go for my refuge. So refuge can be a bit of a tricky idea. We might have associations with running away, living in an ivory tower, going for refuge, escapism. But actually, we're going for refuge all the time. We're going for refuge to something all the time, consciously or not. And some of the things we go for refuge to aren't as helpful as others. So we can go for refuge to new experiences to cheer us up. Food, sex, new gadgets, even new meditations. And these will always let us down in the long run because sooner or later, the relief they bring will need to be replaced by something else. But the 3 jewels will never let us down. So this very day, I go for my refuge. And in that moment, as best we can, we just try and mean it. Even if it's just a little bit, we try and mean it. And then we chant the refuges and precepts. Okay, so you've got 30 seconds with your partner. What are the refuges and what are the precepts? Go. What are the precepts? Positive and negative. So you might need to... Okay, let's have them in order. What are we trying to avoid in the first precept? Shout it out. Harming. What are we trying to cultivate? Who said generosity? Although generosity is, I mean, you have to be generous to be kind, don't you? But I won't say anything, Sarah. Okay, so that's the first precept, yes. Second precept, what are we trying to avoid? Taking the not given. What are we trying to cultivate? Shout it out, yes. Third precept, what are we trying to avoid? What? Third precept. Say that again. And what are we trying to cultivate? Well done, beautiful. And the fourth precept, what are we trying to avoid? And what are we trying to cultivate? Truthful speech. And the fifth one, Alex. And what are we trying to cultivate? Mindfulness. There we go. And that's what we chant. So these, all of the positive ones, all the ones that we're cultivating, that's just the natural way that a Buddha or a Bodhisattva lives in the world. You know, they don't have to try. But of course we do. Of course we do have to try. We have to put effort in. And whether you've recently come off an intro course or whether you've been practicing 50 years, these are at the heart of our practice. And that's why they're in the puja. As we become more sensitive to them, our breaking of them might be more subtle, but we're breaking them every day. day in, day out, we're breaking those precepts. And we notice that it's becoming more subtle, and actually we start to notice in the puja that we don't really live up to them. We become aware of how much we don't live like that. We become aware of all the ways that we don't actually want to. And so we need to do something about that and acknowledge the gap in what we want to live, how we want to live, and how we actually do. So what comes next is the confession section. So this isn't about kind of placating an angry God or so that we're not punished. It's just owning up to the human nature that we are, that we will be unskillful, and acknowledging it so that we can be free of it. We can deny even to ourselves that we're capable of doing really awful things. Where all human beings are, we're not special in that regard. So confessing and admitting is good to go beyond that. Only the enlightened mind is perfect. And so I see where I don't live up to the ideal and confess. And that can be powerful, even if we just kind of give it to the Buddha, just give it to whoever the puja is dedicated to, just give it away, give it away. And then we rejoice because we've acknowledged our shortcomings, and now we can rejoice in all the ways that we do live up to our ideals, all the things that we do that are skillful. I rejoice in the good done by all beings. We start with the little glimmers right the way through to the bodhicitta and the enlightened mind itself. So we're rejoicing in the good that we're part of. We're identifying with the success of all the good done. It's not just about my good, but everywhere it manifests. Because where good is done, that means suffering is reduced. And that's a really good reason to rejoice. Do we always rejoice in the good done by other beings? Or is there a little bit of competition there? Well, in the puja, we can act as if we're delighted with no sense of competition. We can act as if we can practice being delighted. And then we really need a teaching. We need a teaching to help us with all of this. And we get that after the entreaty and supplication. We get a reading from the Buddhist canon. And then we do that thing where we all, we know this hugely important text off by heart. And if you've never done a puja before, suddenly everyone is doing it in unison and they know this really long poem off by heart. And this is the Heart Sutra. People learn it by heart. The heart of perfect wisdom. And it's a hugely important text that boggles the mind. And the Heart Sutra is telling us that we can't know the nature of reality with intellect alone. The problem is that we learn the Heart Sutra by heart and we chant it, but none of us really understand it. It can't be understood by the rational mind. It takes everything we've learned about the Four Noble Truths, about the lakshanas, it takes all that and it turns it on its head and then it turns it back again. And we've reached the point in the puja where we have to be receptive to something that goes beyond words. And that's what the Heart Sutra is doing. We can let go into the poetry of the Heart Sutra and just see what effect it has. Paranita was saying in the team meeting that the first time she heard the Heart Sutra, she just felt like, right, I'm home. I've found where I need to be, and she didn't understand a word of it. So it's very interesting how that can happen. The Dharma just goes in, it just bypasses this and just goes right in. And sometimes that can happen, and it did to Paranita, did it not? It did. So we try and listen with our whole being and just see what effect the Heart Sutra has. And it ends with a mantra, and it tells us that this mantra, a gift from a higher realm, is in fact the very heart of perfect wisdom, wisdom that has gone beyond, completely beyond words and concepts and anything we think we know. So this mantra involving our emotions and our imagination, putting us in touch with the heart of perfect wisdom in a way that words can't. So then we transfer all of the merit that we've gained. Gaining merit is a kind of way of talking about spiritual currency. It's like by doing the puja, we've earned all this merit, and that could make really good things happen for me. And so you could see that it's selfish. And whilst that's going on, the bodhicitta can never arise. Whilst we're thinking, I'm thinking about me and my merit, the bodhicitta doesn't have a chance of me being open to that. So we give it away. We give away all the merit that we've gained. But of course, by giving all that merit away, we get loads more. And then we give that away. So we're not doing, it's an approach to practice that just shows us that we're not doing it for me. We're not doing our practice, we're not doing the puja for me. We're doing it for all of us. We're giving that away. This is the self-surrender final stage, giving yourself to the Buddhist path for the benefit of all beings. And, am I honestly being expected to give up everything? How can we possibly believe that? Well, we're rehearsing. We're rehearsing, getting ourselves out of the way so that there's nothing in the way of us living with our ideals, living by our best ideals. There's nothing holding us back, nothing to cling to, nothing to push away, because we'd be living in reality, living as a bodhisattva. Bhante says an emotional glimpse. We have an emotional glimpse at the end of the puja, what it would be like to be a bodhisattva, totally other regarding, holding nothing back. We use our imaginations for this. We imagine our way to it and act as if. We're playing. Children play to develop certain qualities, and we're playing at this so that we can imagine what it would be like to be a bodhisattva. And we give out that part of ourselves a chance to say it out loud and have that witnessed. And it's it's a cause for celebration. It's a huge party kind of atmosphere at the end of the puja with celebration. And then the final mantras. Dun, dun, dun. So the final mantras that we do, I thought it would be nice to actually see the bodhisattvas that we invoke. So the first three, Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, and Vajrapani. So these three, the first three mantras at the end of the puja, these are the bodhisattvas of compassion, wisdom, and energy. So those three they're like a little trio, they go together. So what we're doing when we chant these mantras right at the very end, when we chant them 3 times each and we go through at the end just before the very end of the puja. So we're invoking, these are the beings that we're invoking. So when we chant these mantras at the end of the puja, we're bringing them into the room. So imagining Avalokiteshvara just hanging there, this being of light and compassion. All the colours and the beauty of Avalokiteshvara just there in the room with us. That soft, beautiful face and the lotuses and all the arms in the room with us. That's what we're doing when we chant these mantras. Manjushri and his sword, the sword on fire that Vidanya was talking about last week, he's in the room with us when we chant this mantra at the end of the puja, invoking the qualities of wisdom, seeing through to the nature of reality. Vajrapani, look at those flames around him. He's on fire with the Dharma and he's stamping on things that get in the way. So the energy that we need the energy and determination and courage and commitment that we need to practice the Dharma. And then we have the Tara mantra. And so I had a little conflab with Satyajyoti and Achara, and we reckon that the first 3 are in the list because they are those important trio. And the rest of them are Bhante Sangharakshita's particular personal practice. So here, a very, very long, many years practice of Tara, doing the Tara sadhana practice, and of Amitabha. So we're chanting these mantras and invoking them at the end of the puja. And Shakyamuni, obviously very important being. And Padmasambhava. And he's coming into the room. So you can imagine that it's like it's crowded. The air above us, the sky above us is crowded with these beings at the end of the puja. And this is the bit where we're coming to the very end and they're all coming in to help us with our practice. And then Prajnaparamita. The final mantra is gone beyond. Prajnaparamita just goes beyond any thought of self. And here is where the final, the sense of going beyond and beyond our personal needs and wants and cravings, and all of that just falls away with Prajnaparamita's mantra at the end. So all of these in the sky above us, circling around as we do the final mantras, to give us the strength that we need to let everything go, just to let it all go, let it all go. And then after that, there's this peace, the 3 shantis, the peace of the calm, silent unity of purpose, the deep peace of the enlightened mind. It's fine, I can stay. The deep peace of the enlightened mind, this emotional glimpse of what it would be like to be a bodhisattva. And we just let go into that. And I'm sure that those of you who have done the puja before might have had a sense of that peace at the end. And here is where we can imagine the possibility of opening to the awakening heart, mind. So give it a go. Give puja a go. We're going to do a puja next week. And in the meantime, we could try and bring a bit more magic into our practice. We can imagine our way to the awakening heart-mind. If you don't have a shrine already at home, make one. If you do have a shrine already at home, just take a bit more notice of it. Spruce it up a bit, put some fresh flowers on. Bringing our practice of aligning with these beings into our everyday life. Chant a mantra. Even if you don't meditate every day, you can, bring them to mind. If you feel a connection with these figures, go through the end of puja mantras. See what it's like to have these beings evoked into your living room. Or, to bring them to get a sense of their protection and inspiration that they might offer. Imagine what it might be like to serve these beautiful, magical ideal of the awakening heart, mind of the bodhicitta. That's it.